Many people who are waiting for revival, and it's a Christian buzzword. You don't see the word revival very often in the Bible. It's there, but it's not as commonly used in the Bible as it is today in our vocabulary. Everybody's longing for revival, looking for revival, talking about revival, prophesying revival, proclaiming revival. There's something that I call personal revival, where you have a fresh experience with the Lord. You tap into the source. You get back to the fountain of living water. You experience God afresh. And you can have that in the morning, and it evaporates by evening. And so then we think there's something wrong with us, that we didn't keep it, we didn't contain it. But the thing about personal revival is it can happen in a meeting, it can happen in a moment, and it can last for a short time. It could last for an hour, it could last for a day. I've had personal revivals last for 3 days, where you just have a deep, deep sense of the holiness of God, the nearness of God, hearing His voice, having Him visit me in some way. Wish there was some way to contain that, and of course we try, I suppose. But what if it's just that? What if it's a moment of revival? We're waiting for national revival, something that would change our nation. We're waiting for revival that would sweep through our state or our town or our whole church. And there are people who wait and wait and wait and wait, and they never really see it. But I suspect that there's revival that happens moment by moment, momentary, personal revival, but we don't call it that. But it's real revival. It's revival in the purest sense. It's revival in a biblical sense. In fact, let me say this: that all revival that happened in the Bible, all revival that we see in church history, all came out of someone experiencing a personal revival. And they have a personal revival, and it spreads, and next thing you know, it affects a whole nation. You think about the revival of John the Baptist. It really started with a teenage young man who would leave home for a day, go off into the wilderness to be with God, come back, take his rucksack, and he heads off back out into the wilderness again. As his parents see him leaving, they notice he's not taking any food with him, and by the time they're in bed at night, he's coming back through. They hear the door creaking, and it's him coming home, and he's been out with God. He's been tapping into the source, hearing from God. It wasn't anything happening for 400 years. No prophecies, no prophets, no move of God, no visitation at all. But this one young man, as a teenager, and then in his 20s, and then in his early 30s, would go out and seek God. And what God worked in him, what God spoke in him, and what he experienced in terms of repentance, what he experienced in coming back to God, and experiencing God, going to the source, he led the entire nation into that same experience by himself. He didn't wait for the nation to come alive and then he jumped on it. He didn't wait for other people. He didn't wait for a movement. He created a movement by himself. It was really just a young man getting back to the source. And then it says that all Judea, all Jerusalem, and all the area round about, that's a sizable piece of real estate, all made this trek, made a pathway out into the wilderness to hear this young guy telling them about his fresh experience with the living God, telling and relaying what God was speaking to him, to them. And that led to national revival. It was a preparatory revival for the greatest revival, which was the revival of Jesus. The revivals look different, they had different purposes, but they're both revival. But it started with a personal revival. As I go through church history and I look at it, I see that all revival began with someone having a personal revival.